So tonight we're seeing reports that President Trump is planning to designate both Antifa and even the KKK as domestic terrorist organizations. And he's calling for lynching as well to be made a national hate crime. Do you think this is the right move to address some of the unrest we're seeing on the streets?
I think it is. I mean, if we look at it from a political perspective, it would be very hard for President Trump to penalize Antifa, but then not also penalize the other side of the spectrum, which would, in this case, as you've defined, to be the KKK. It may estrange some supporters on both sides, but I think it absolutely is the right move for President Trump and the administration.
Yeah, and so when it comes to this, we're seeing the president earlier this summer, he wanted Antifa specifically because they are who's on the streets right now. And funny to point out, the KKK goes back to Democrats. That's who, started the whole thing in the first place. So Democrats, they own both of these. But when it comes to Antifa specifically, we had the president, he wanted them to be designated as a domestic terror group. A lot of supporters were excited about that. However, the FBI's director, Christopher Wray, was kind of throwing some cold water on that idea, saying that they're not organized enough to be considered one. What are some of the legal issues at play here?
Well, when you designate a group to be a terrorist organization, what that really does is open the books, let's say. It gives the government a tremendous amount of financial access and access to the financial pushes and the funding behind these organizations. You bring up the issue of a lack of organization and what the FBI director said. I understand that argument. I've heard that argument. I think it's an empty argument. When you talk about in your introduction of George Soros and the pushing of some district attorneys throughout our union, I will say in our sunny state of California and San Diego here, we had an opponent for our current district attorney who was supported at a point in time by the Soros administration and the group. Now, the import of that is tremendous because here in San Diego, we also had riots. We also had not so peaceful protests. But we also had our district attorney here levy charges against those with the most egregious conduct and contact towards officers and people who have vandalized hardworking people's businesses. So your introduction comments are spot on. And here in San Diego, we can really see the effect of making sure these Soros-backed proponents of law are not allowed to make these crucial calls.
And funny that you mentioned that as well, because in Portland, the DA there, I believe his name is Mike Schmidt, he says he's good friends with a well-known Antifa militant in the area. And then it's funny then how he's in charge of this whole situation because then he's the one who's just letting all these rioters back out onto the streets. I think that's kind of a conflict of interest there. And also to your point as well about the organization issue, we were seeing on the first night of the Louisville riots and stuff, vans pulling in full of riot gear, very well coordinated. You see their communications online. They tell each other where to meet, where to go, what to do. So there is a lot of organization there, and I know that's what a lot of people on the right, especially when they're looking at the FBI director Christopher Wray, they're saying, it's right here, it's right in front of our eyes. Why do you think up until this point there's been so much hesitation from a lot of elected officials to name Antifa by name, to say that they are acting as a terrorist group? Why do you think that they're so tight-lipped about this?
I think, frankly, many of the politicians are fooled. As my wife and I talk quite often, it's 99% of the media coverage regarding these riots and horrible crimes against officers that originate with about 1% of those who have those beliefs. But 99% of what we see on the news and read in the papers is a proliferation of that 1% view. So, you talk about the lack of designating the appropriate amount of organization. There are legal consequences to that as well. We've had cases throughout the United States here where there's been designations of certain groups as organized crime for prosecutions and federal indictments under the continuing criminal enterprise statute. Now, once a group is classified as an organization, or in this case, as we're talking about, as a terrorist organization, that label cannot be reversed. And the fear by some politicians and those who may be of a particular tilt is that once we are so gracious in labeling opposing views as organizations, then it would just be an invitation to continuously stifle the opposing view. That's the logic. As I say, it doesn't hold water in my book, in my experience of almost 20 years litigating organized crime cases. I will tell you it doesn't hold water. It's really playing to the political flute that's playing throughout the country.